More on the fallout from the death of Osama bin Laden now. The US President Barack Obama today called for a thorough investigation to take place to determine whether the al-Qaeda leader had a support network within the Pakistan government.
We think that there had to be some sort of support network for bin Laden inside of Pakistan. But we don't know who or what that support network was. We don't know whether there might have been some people inside of government, people outside of government, and that's something that we have to investigate, and more importantly, the Pakistani government has to investigate. And we've already communicated to them, and they have indicated they have a profound interest in finding out what kinds of support networks bin Laden might have had. But these are questions that we're not going to be able to answer 3 or 4 days after the event. It's going to take some time for us to be able to exploit the intelligence that we were able to gather on site.
Now, as more information and intelligence surrounding the killing of bin Laden continues to come out, more and more questions are also being asked of the US President. The chief UN official, Christoph Heyns, today called on the White House to disclose the exact mission orders given to the US Navy SEALs ahead of the operation in which bin Laden was killed. He believes that questions need to be asked about the legality of the attack.
The question is, should one really meet force or without any international legal standards applicable? And I do think that in terms of fighting terrorism, that should be done on the basis of the rule of law.
So how much information should we be given about the US operation that saw bin Laden killed, and what good will this information do? On the line with me now, the former US intelligence officer and author of An End to Al-Qaeda, Malcolm Nance. Hello to you, Malcolm.
Good evening.
Hello, Malcolm. And a journalist and specialist on Middle East affairs, Nabila Ramdani. Hello, Nabila.
Hello, good evening.
Hello there. Well, Malcolm, this UN official has said orders given to the Navy SEALs should be released. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that at all. It's been very clear from the very beginning of the hunt for Osama bin Laden that the United States had issued by executive presidential directive that Osama bin Laden was on a high-value capture or kill list. Osama bin Laden, throughout his entire career, has always kept close personal weapons to him. There's not been a photograph seen where he didn't have a Kalashnikov, and he himself had said that he would martyr himself using an explosive belt. So when you think about it operationally, somebody, turning a corner, coming into a room and seeing the world's most wanted man, who has said many times he would not be taken alive, you have to assume that he's going to act offensively. So issuing the orders or seeing the orders would be near folly, as we would see the same thing that had been said by presidents of the United States for 10 years.
So therefore, there's nothing to hide?
Not really, no.
So therefore, the orders could be released?
Well, the thing is, you're talking about highly classified missions, many of which are going to continue and have continued for some time. We still have to look for his second-in-command, the other lieutenants, including Saif al-Adil and others who were involved in many other plots preceding September 11th. So compromising the orders of this mission could compromise those missions.
Nabila?
Well, I think we've heard President Obama saying that the role of Pakistan in harbouring the most hunted man on the planet should be investigated. And similarly, I do believe that there should be some investigation as well as to whether or not the US operation was legal in terms of international law. I think on a very basic level, it's perhaps a truism to say that people in a civilized society are uncomfortable at the thought of anybody behind, shooting people without trial. And also, evidently, there was a lot of information that has come out about the conditions in which bin Laden was killed. And we really need to know to get to the bottom of all this. And as I said, for a start, the raid took place in a sovereign country in Pakistan, which was not informed about what was happening. And if we take all the emotional elements out of this, we're dealing with profound questions of international law. And many people are profoundly uncomfortable that these questions haven't been answered. And I think that the whole point of civilized society is that we accept the rule of law and that we deal with matters according to due process.
What do you think actually happened, Nabila?
Well, that's the thing. We can speculate about everything which happened, just as the Americans did at the time of the official announcement last Monday. And it seems proved that a lot of what they said, of what the Americans were saying, was wrong. For example, I would like to hear more from Bin Laden's wife, his son, and the daughter that were with him. Why should we have a unilateral version only of what happened, and that is the American version solely?
Interested to get your views tonight on this. 0500 909 693. Nabila, do you think it was inevitable that the Pakistan government, officials within that government, had knowledge of bin Laden's whereabouts?
Well, I have to say it's truly embarrassing for Pakistan, where, bin Laden was hiding a few yards away from, the Pakistani Sandhurst, the military academy. So that's a really embarrassing situation for Pakistan. We know that bin Laden has a core of hardcore followers, in fact, in Pakistan, and therefore, the country is in a very tricky situation, because if indeed it did collaborate with the US in killing bin Laden, it's in a tricky position to admit it, because it would upset the hardcore followers of bin Laden in Pakistan. And if it didn't play any role in all this, then again we go back to those serious issues of international law that I was referring to.
Malcolm?
Well, I think it's a brilliant game of Monday morning goaltending here. The mission has already been accomplished, and the task has already been done. The Pakistanis have been cooperating with the United States for the last decade in very, very deep-level intelligence collection and operations within the borders of Pakistan. The Pakistanis cooperate and collaborate on a broad level with regards to the drone attacks in western Pakistan, the capture and killing of other senior high-level members of Al-Qaeda. And for this one to be called or considered by any stretch of the imagination a question of, violating Pakistan's sovereignty, when in fact Pakistan is an active partner in neutralizing the Al-Qaeda organization, not to mention a country which has suffered many, many thousands of victims itself from an organization which is foreign, operating within its own lands. When you talk about the killing of 4 persons who were well-known terrorists, one, of course, the most well-known terrorist in the world, who's responsible for the mass murder of 3,000 Americans and thousands of others throughout the world, I think this question becomes moot. And I think it's great academia, but in the real world, it's not something that I think that anyone, aside from a few people in Pakistan who would argue, who would protest virtually anything that is done by the United States or the Pakistani government.
Yeah,
so now it goes off in the world of conspiracy theory.
But what are we looking at now, Malcolm? Is Christoph Haynes right? Do we now have a global battlefield? If the US is justified entering Pakistan without informing the government, then where can't they go?
Well, it's a question of whether Pakistan actually was informed or not. They have very sensitive politics, and I'm sure our other guests could explain that more clearly. But there are many things that we will allow Pakistan to say that they don't have knowledge of, when in fact it's virtually impossible to operate on our own inside Pakistan without their cooperation. They have far greater assets on the ground. And of course, this does come back to the question of, how did he live so close to the Kabul military academy without people knowing? But we have been having a global battlefield with the Al-Qaeda organization almost since its inception in 1988. We've had operations by many countries done many times all over the world. So there's nothing new here. What we have done is we have neutralized the ideological creator of the Al-Qaeda organization and the person who manages to motivate people throughout the world to kill themselves and thousands of others in a corrupted form of what they believe is Islam. We've done the world a favor.
I'm very interested in hearing from you tonight as you're listening to this at home. Do you need to know? Do you care what orders were given about bin Laden? Are you just happy he's dead? 0500 909 693. 0500 909 693. Do you care? Do you think the public care, Nabila?
Well, I think the public cares a lot because we're hearing very conflicting reports from the White House about the conditions in which bin Laden was killed. I disagree with the other guest when he says it's an academic question. It's not an academic question. It has a lot to do with the sentiment in Pakistan and increasingly in the Arab and Muslim world. There's a very clear situation here where Pakistan denies being in the know of what happened in relation to bin Laden's killing. And the Americans said that as well. So we need to know whether or not Pakistan was aware of what was going on. It's a very simple question. And it,
yeah, if I could just interject there, I sort of agree with you in that respect. However, I think that's a matter for Pakistan and perhaps some international commissions to investigate about what Pakistan knew.
No, I disagree. I think it's a matter of international law because it sets a very, very dangerous precedent. Can the US behave like cowboys, enter a country, breach its sovereignty, go and kill someone, and be all triumphalist about it? And that's another point that's very important in all this narrative. The fact that it is of course a huge success for American foreign policy at the moment, but it has the potential to backfire massively because of the triumphalist attitude of the Americans and the release of the videos about bin Laden, showing him in a very humiliating light, looking very scruffy indeed. It's, in my opinion, a repeat of those footage we saw of Saddam Hussein a while back, and this surely will have a devastating effect on the Arab Muslim world. Why do you have to humiliate people after you got them? Can we all move on and answer those fundamental international law questions before we do so?
Well, if I could just comment here, even though I'm talking to you from the United States, I live permanently in the Muslim world, and I can tell you the sentiments that I've heard from just this last week from the United Arab Emirates to some other Gulf states in Egypt. They're not talking about it, apart from the interesting fact that they're getting on television. And I can actually explain why there's been a disparity in the communications of the first days of what the story was. The White House itself was not actually watching the mission on television screens. The unit commander who was on the ground with the commando force was radioing back reports to Bagram. Bagram was then verbally repeating that back to the White House, and the initial reports were just the images that these people saw in their heads based on the raw information. And now as the story has firmed up and the debriefs have occurred, we now know what's occurred there. But again, I think this is going to be quickly overtaken by events. Osama bin Laden has either caused or as directly responsible for or created the chain of events which have killed hundreds of thousands over the last 10 years, including a horrific war in Iraq, which had nothing to do with 9/11. But all of these things collectively put together are an academic question, because I can tell you right now the world is moving on from this, and the United States is not viewing this as a matter of triumph. It's viewing it as a matter of we have now put the stake in the heart of the world's most dangerous organization, and perhaps we can move on to bigger topics like climate change and the global economy now that we've gotten the Al-Qaeda organization to a certain extent in a now manageable position.
Let's talk to Brian in Plymouth. Hello, Brian.
Oh, good evening.
What do you think?
Evening.
What do you think, Brian?
Well, I'm listening with interest to the conversation. I have to say I can't agree with the lady that has put her points over, and I'm very pleased to think that the American gentleman there has made his comments in a very subdued way and been quite polite to somebody who I believe doesn't know what she's talking about.
Well, hold on a minute. What's your view?
Well, my view is that, you know, I've grown up with this within a family in the UK. I've seen people killed in London. I've seen the disaster in New York where the towers came down and were deliberately targeted. Osama bin Laden set out to have an organisation and to fund other groups to create havoc around the world. And the issue of law here is that the Americans, or whoever did this act to get rid of him, I believe had every right to not tell the country they were going into, because that would have compromised what they were trying to achieve. And I actually do believe that history will show that the Pakistanis or someone did know that he was there. I don't believe he was there without somebody knowing that this person was around. The activities locally suggested that something was quite unusual. The lady who says that it's got to go to law, if he'd been arrested, if he could have been arrested, saying that he strapped a bomb to his body, and he was always seen armed, the SEALs had to take him out. And I believe that if he'd stayed alive, he'd have become a martyr. And within law, while this was being debated, he would almost certainly, possibly have got away with remaining alive for the rest of his life as the figurehead of an organisation that wanted to destroy me, you, and the rest of the world, and he would have kept going. The lady there should be ashamed of what she said.
Nabila, do you want to respond to this?
Yes, absolutely. The basic point I'm trying to make is by putting forward conflicting reports about the conditions in which bin Laden was killed, evidently trying to humiliate him, trying to portray him as a coward, saying he was hiding, he used his wife as human shield, and he was armed, and it turned out that the latest we heard he wasn't armed and he didn't use his wife as human shield. Well, all this, we need to get to the bottom of this, and let me go back to the triumphalist attitude of the US. We've seen staff at the White House, putting phone calls and clearly rejoicing over that news. We've seen Michelle Obama addressing students at the university. All I'm saying is that there was also a debate about whether or not they should release pictures about the dead body of someone. Well, I think anybody who even considers releasing gruesome pictures of a dead body in any circumstances behaves in a similar tribal and insensitive and, dare I say, barbaric manner.
But the pictures weren't
the
released.
Radical Islamist that the US are supposed to fight.
The pics were not released.
I know, but what I'm saying is the very fact that they were considering it. And let me tell you that what tipped the balance in terms of not releasing the pictures is not, what would be the sentiment around the world about the issue, but it's because the military personnel in America literally implored President Obama not to release the pictures because it would put their lives at risk.
We've got many calls coming in this. I'll actually come back to this after the news tonight. Nabila, in the meantime, thank you. Malcolm, thank you.